The alarm clock rang at 5:30 in the morning. Marcus Chen opened his eyes and stared at the ceiling of his small apartment. He had been doing this same thing for 7 years now. Wake up, get dressed, take the bus to Riverside University, and clean the buildings before anyone else arrived. Marcus was 52 years old. His hair was starting to turn gray at the sides. His hands were rough from years of cleaning work, but his eyes were sharp and clear. They were the eyes of someone who noticed everything, even the small details that other people missed. He got out of bed and walked to the tiny kitchen. The apartment was quiet. It had been quiet for many years now, ever since his wife passed away 5 years ago. She had always made the mornings feel less empty. Now Marcus just made his coffee in silence and ate his toast alone. By 6:15, he was on the bus. The city was still dark outside the windows. A few other workers sat on the bus with him. A nurse going home after a night shift, a baker heading to start the morning bread, a security guard with tired eyes. Nobody talked. They all just looked out the windows or down at their phones. Marcus liked this quiet time. It gave him space to think. Sometimes he thought about his life back in China. Sometimes he thought about his children who were all grown up now and living their own lives. Sometimes he thought about nothing at all. He just watched the city wake up slowly through the bus window. The bus dropped him off at the university gates at 6:25. Marcus walked through the empty campus with his hands in his pockets. The trees were big and old here. The buildings were made of red brick and looked important. Students would fill these paths in a few hours, rushing to classes with their backpacks and coffee cups. But right now it all belonged to Marcus and the few other early workers. He reached the mathematics building and used his key to open the side door. The building smelled like chalk dust and old paper. Marcus had cleaned this building so many times that he knew every corner of it. He knew which bathroom faucet dripped. He knew which classroom had the squeaky door. He knew which professors left their lights on all night. Marcus went to the janitor's closet and got his cleaning cart. It had a mop, a bucket, cleaning sprays, trash bags, and a box of rags. The cart's wheels squeaked as he pushed it down the hallway. That squeak was like his morning song. It told him the day had officially started. He began his routine on the first floor. Empty the trash cans in the student study area, wipe down the tables, sweep the floors, check the bathrooms, and restock the soap and paper towels. It was simple work that his body knew how to do without thinking. But Marcus's mind was always somewhere else while he worked. He thought about problems. Not his own problems, but math problems. Because Marcus had a secret that nobody at this university knew. He understood mathematics. Not just basic math, but deep, complicated mathematics. The kind that professors spent their whole lives studying. This secret lived quietly inside him. It had been there for more than 20 years, like a treasure buried so deep that even Marcus sometimes forgot it was there. But every morning, when he walked through this mathematics building, the treasure started to glow a little bit. By 7 o'clock, Marcus had finished the first floor. He pushed his squeaky cart up to the second floor. This was where the professors had their offices. He cleaned these offices carefully. Professor Martinez always had papers everywhere. Professor Johnson kept his office very neat, except for the coffee cups that he forgot about. Professor Hartwell worked late into the night and sometimes fell asleep at her desk. Marcus liked Professor Hartwell. She was always kind to him. She said good morning when she saw him. She asked him how he was doing. She actually waited for his answer instead of just walking away. Not all professors did that. Some of them looked right through Marcus like he was invisible, like he was just part of the building itself, no different from a desk or a window. After cleaning the offices, Marcus moved to the lecture halls. There were 3 big lecture halls on the second floor. These were the rooms where he felt most strange. When they were full of students, Marcus just did his job quickly and left. But in the early morning, when they were empty, he sometimes stopped and looked around. The chairs were arranged in neat rows, all facing the front. The big chalkboards covered the walls. Sometimes professors left their work on these boards from the night before. Equations and diagrams and symbols that most people could not understand. But Marcus understood them. That was his secret. He walked into Lecture Hall B and stopped. Professor Hartwell had been here late last night. Marcus could tell because her coffee cup was still on the desk at the front, and she had left something on the chalkboards. Not just a little bit of writing, but something big. The equation stretched across 3 connected chalkboards that covered the entire front wall of the room. Marcus should have just erased it. That was his job. Wipe the boards clean for the morning classes. But he did not reach for his eraser. Instead, he stood there and looked at what Professor Hartwell had written. It was a differential equation. A complicated one. Marcus could see that she was working on something about fluid dynamics, the way liquids and gases move and flow. There were boundary conditions and partial derivatives. There were question marks in several places where Professor Hartwell had gotten stuck. Marcus's heart started beating a little faster. His hands felt strange. It was like seeing an old friend after many years. This mathematical language had once been his whole world. He had dreamed in these symbols. He had spent hours and hours working through problems just like this one. He told himself to just clean the board and move on. This was not his life anymore. He was a janitor. He cleaned buildings. He emptied trash. He mopped floors. That was who he was now, but his feet would not move. His eyes kept reading the equation, following the logic, seeing where Professor Hartwell had tried different approaches, understanding why she had gotten stuck. The building was completely silent. No footsteps in the halls, no voices. Nobody would come here for at least another hour. Marcus was alone with this equation. He set down his cleaning cloth. His hand moved almost by itself to the chalk tray. There were several pieces of chalk lying there. White chalk that Professor Hartwell had been using. Marcus picked up a piece. It felt light in his hand. It felt right. He stood in front of the chalkboard. The morning sun was starting to come through the tall windows. It made the chalk dust in the air look like tiny stars floating in the room. Marcus looked at the equation one more time. Then he started to write. Marcus Chen had not always been a janitor. There was a time when his life looked very different. A time when he wore nice clothes and carried books instead of a mop. A time when people called him by a different name. They called him Student Chen, or sometimes the Promising One. This was more than 20 years ago in China. Marcus was 28 years old then. He was a graduate student at Tsinghua University, one of the best universities in the country. He studied mathematics, not the simple math that children learn in school, but the deep kind of math that tries to explain how the world works. Marcus was good at it. Very good. His professor said he had a special gift. He could see patterns that other students missed. He could solve problems that made other people give up. When he sat down with an equation, it was like he was having a conversation with it. The numbers and symbols spoke to him in a language that felt more natural than regular words. He lived in a small room near the campus. The room had a bed, a desk, and shelves full of books. Math books mostly, but also some poetry and history. Marcus did not need much. He was happy with his books and his problems to solve. Every morning he woke up early and went to the library. He worked on his research there, filling notebooks with calculations. He was studying differential equations, trying to find new ways to solve them. His professors said his work was important. They said he might publish papers in major journals. They said he had a bright future ahead of him. Marcus had a girlfriend then, too. Her name was Lynn. She was studying literature at the same university. She liked to read poems to him while he worked on equations. She said math and poetry were not so different. Both were trying to find truth and beauty in the world. Marcus liked that idea. They used to walk around the campus together in the evenings. Lynn would talk about the book she was reading. Marcus would try to explain his research in simple words. Sometimes they just held hands and did not talk at all. Those were good times, simple and peaceful times. But then everything changed. Marcus's father got sick. It happened suddenly. One day his father was healthy and working at the family shop. The next day he could not get out of bed. The doctor said it was his heart. They said he needed expensive treatments. They said the family needed to prepare for the worst. Marcus had 2 younger sisters. One was still in high school. The other had just started college. His mother worked at the shop, but she could not run it alone. The family business was a small electronics repair shop. It had supported the family for many years, but it was not making much money anymore. Marcus took the train home. It was a long ride from Beijing to his small town. He sat by the window and watched the countryside pass by. Fields of crops, small villages, rivers and mountains. Everything looked the same as always, but Marcus knew his life was about to change completely. When he got home, he saw his father lying in bed. His father looked smaller somehow, weaker. His face was gray and his breathing was difficult. Marcus's mother was trying to be strong, but her eyes were red from crying. His sisters were scared and confused. That night, Marcus could not sleep. He lay in his old childhood bed and stared at the ceiling. He thought about his research waiting for him in Beijing. He thought about Lin. He thought about the future his professors had promised him. And he thought about his family who needed him right now. The decision felt impossible. How could he choose between his dreams and his family? But deep down, Marcus knew there was no real choice. His family needed him. His father needed expensive treatments. His sisters needed to finish their education. His mother needed help with the shop and with taking care of his father. Marcus could go back to Beijing and finish his degree. But then what would happen to his family? They would struggle. They might lose everything. His sisters might have to quit school. His father might not get the treatment he needed, or Marcus could stay. He could give up his research and his degree. He could work and send his sisters to school. He could make sure his father got treatment. He could save his family. When he thought about it that way, it was not really a choice at all. The next morning, Marcus called his professor. He said he had to leave the program. His professor was shocked. He tried to convince Marcus to stay. He said Marcus was too talented to quit. He said they could find a way to help his family. He said Marcus was making a mistake, but Marcus had already made up his mind. He thanked his professor for everything. He said goodbye and hung up the phone. He called Lin next. That conversation was harder. Lin cried. She said they could make it work somehow. She said she would wait for him. She said his research was too important to give up. But Marcus knew the truth. He was not coming back to Beijing. Not next month. Not next year. Maybe not ever. It was not fair to ask Lin to wait for a future that might never come. So he told her goodbye. He told her to forget about him and find someone else. Someone who could give her the life she deserved. After he hung up, Marcus sat alone in his childhood room and cried. He cried for his research that would never be finished. He cried for the future that would never happen. He cried for Lin and for the life they would never have together. But then he dried his tears. He stood up and got to work, because that was what needed to be done. Marcus spent the next 5 years taking care of his family. He worked at the repair shop during the day. He took his father to doctor appointments. He helped his sisters with their homework. He paid bills and fixed things that broke and did whatever needed to be done. His father got a little better with treatment. Not completely healthy, but stable. His sisters graduated from school. The older one became a teacher. The younger one got a job at a bank. They both found good husbands and started their own families. Marcus felt proud of them. He had given up his dream so they could achieve theirs. That was worth something. That had to be worth something. But his father never fully recovered. And then one winter he got pneumonia. His weak heart could not fight it. He died on a cold January morning with his family around his bed. After the funeral, Marcus felt lost. His sisters were grown up now. They had their own lives. His mother had the insurance money from his father. The shop was sold. Marcus had done what he needed to do. His family was okay now, but what about him? He was 33 years old. He had no degree. His research was 5 years old and forgotten. The field of mathematics had moved on without him. He had no job prospects and no clear path forward. That was when he decided to go to America. His cousin lived there and said he could help Marcus find work. It would be a fresh start. A new life in a new country. Marcus arrived in America with 2 suitcases and very little money. His English was not great. His cousin helped him get a job as a janitor at a university. It was just temporary, his cousin said, just until Marcus figured out what he really wanted to do. But temporary became permanent. Marcus learned English from watching television and talking to people. He learned how to clean buildings properly. He learned how to be invisible, how to do his work without bothering anyone. He told himself he would go back to mathematics someday. He would finish his degree. He would pick up where he left off. But years passed. His English got better, but his math stayed frozen in the past. He got married to a woman named Sarah who worked at the university cafeteria. She was kind and patient and did not ask too many questions about his past. They had 2 children, a boy and a girl. Marcus worked hard to give them good lives. He taught them to value education. Both of them went to college. Both of them graduated and got good jobs. Marcus felt proud again. But then Sarah got cancer. She fought it for 2 years before she died. After that, Marcus was alone again. His children had moved to other cities for their careers. His mother back in China was old now. His sisters had their own families to worry about. Marcus kept working as a janitor. It was what he knew how to do. And every morning, when he walked through the mathematics building at Riverside University, he felt a strange feeling in his chest. Like an old wound that never quite healed. A reminder of the person he used to be and the life he almost had. The mathematics was still there, buried deep inside him. It had never really left. It was like a language he used to speak fluently, but now only remembered in dreams. Every time he saw an equation on a chalkboard, something woke up inside him. Something that remembered what it felt like to understand, to solve, to know. But Marcus always pushed that feeling back down. He would wipe the boards clean and move on to the next room. Because he was a janitor now. That was his life. That was all it would ever be. Until one Tuesday morning when he saw Professor Hartwell's equation on the board, and something inside him refused to stay buried anymore. Marcus stood in front of the chalkboard with the piece of chalk in his hand. His heart was beating fast. The lecture hall was completely silent except for the sound of his own breathing. Morning light came through the tall windows and made everything look gold and soft. He looked at the equation that Professor Hartwell had left on the board. It covered 3 whole chalkboards connected together. The symbols and numbers were written in her neat, careful handwriting. Marcus could tell she had spent hours working on this. Maybe days, maybe even weeks. The equation was about fluid dynamics. Marcus recognized it immediately. It was the kind of math used to understand how water moves in rivers, or how air flows around airplane wings, or how blood moves through the body. It was complicated math that tried to describe something that was always changing and moving. Professor Hartwell had written the main equation at the top. Then below it, she had tried different approaches to solve it. Marcus could follow her thinking. She had tried separation of variables first. That was a common method, but it had not worked. The boundary conditions were too complicated. Then she had tried a different approach using series expansion. Marcus could see where that had led her. She had gotten pretty far with that method. But then she had hit a wall. The series did not converge properly. It just kept going and going without reaching an answer. There were question marks written in several places. These marked the spots where Professor Hartwell had gotten stuck. Where the math had stopped making sense to her. Where she did not know what to do next. Marcus felt something strange happening inside him. It was like waking up after a very long sleep. His mind was starting to work in ways it had not worked for 20 years. He began to see things in the equation. Patterns, possibilities, a path forward that Professor Hartwell had not noticed. He should put down the chalk. He should clean the board and forget about it. This was not his problem to solve. This was not his life anymore. But his hand would not let go of the chalk. His feet would not move away from the board. His eyes kept staring at those question marks and his brain kept saying, I know how to fix this. I know what comes next. Marcus looked at the door. Still closed, still silent. Nobody was in the hallway. He could hear his own pulse beating in his ears. The clock on the wall said 7:15. Students would not arrive until almost 9. Professors usually came around 8 or 8:30. He had time, maybe an hour, maybe more. He took a deep breath. Then he started writing. His hand moved slowly at first. The chalk felt strange after so many years. But muscle memory is a powerful thing. Soon his hand was moving more smoothly, writing the symbols he had written 1,000 times before in another life. Marcus started by looking at the equation from a different angle. Professor Hartwell had been treating it as one big problem, but Marcus saw that it could be broken into smaller pieces. He introduced a substitution, a way of replacing one complicated part with something simpler. This was a technique he had learned many years ago from a research paper written by a Chinese mathematician. The paper had been published in a small journal that most American mathematicians probably never read. But Marcus had read it when he was a graduate student. He had read it so many times that he had memorized parts of it. The substitution was elegant. It was like untying a knot by pulling the right string. Suddenly, the complicated parts of the equation started to simplify. Terms canceled out. Patterns emerged. Marcus wrote faster now. His hand moved across the board with confidence. He was not thinking about being a janitor anymore. He was not thinking about his cleaning cart waiting in the corner, or the bathrooms he still needed to clean on this floor. He was just thinking about the math. He introduced a coordinate transformation next. This changed the way the equation looked at space. Instead of using regular x and y coordinates, he used coordinates that followed the flow of the fluid itself. This made the boundary conditions much easier to work with. Professor Hartwell had been stuck because the boundary conditions seemed to contradict each other. But in the new coordinate system, the contradiction disappeared. The boundaries suddenly made sense. Marcus filled up one section of the chalkboard with his calculations. Then he moved to another section. His handwriting was different from Professor Hartwell's. His numbers were rounder. His symbols were written in a slightly different style. Anyone who knew about math would be able to see that two different people had worked on this board. But Marcus was not thinking about that. He was deep in the problem now, lost in it. The rest of the world had faded away. There was only the equation and the chalk and the board. He worked through the transformed equation step by step, applied integration techniques, used theorems he had learned decades ago. His mind pulled up memories of late nights in the library at Tsinghua University. Books open all around him, his professor's voice explaining a concept. Lin reading poetry in the corner while he worked. These memories came back so clearly that Marcus almost forgot where he was. For 15 minutes he was 28 years old again. He was student Chen, the promising one, the person who understood numbers and symbols better than he understood people. The solution was taking shape now. Marcus could see the end approaching. He worked faster, his chalk making quick scratching sounds against the board. He checked his work as he went. Math was not forgiving. One small mistake could ruin everything. But his calculations were clean, correct, beautiful even. Finally, he wrote the last line. The solution. It was expressed as an infinite series, but this series actually converged. It gave real answers. It worked. Marcus stepped back from the board. He was breathing hard like he had been running. His right hand was covered in chalk dust. His fingers ached a little from gripping the chalk so tightly. But he had done it. He had solved Professor Hartwell's equation. He stared at what he had written. 3 chalkboards filled with math. His math. The first real mathematics he had done in more than 20 years. It felt like finding a piece of himself that he thought was lost forever. For a moment, Marcus felt purely happy. Not the quiet contentment of a job well done. Not the mild satisfaction of getting through another day, but real happiness. The kind that lights up your whole chest and makes you want to laugh out loud. But then reality came rushing back. What had he done? This was not his classroom. This was not his equation. He was a janitor. He had no right to be writing on this board. No right to be solving problems that belonged to a professor. Panic started to rise in Marcus's chest. He looked at the door again. Still closed, still quiet, but how much time had passed? He looked at the clock. 7:32. He had been writing for almost 15 minutes. He needed to finish his work. He still had the 3rd floor to clean. He still had trash to empty and floors to mop. But what should he do about the board? He could erase everything he had written. Wipe it clean like nothing had happened. Go back to being invisible, safe, just the janitor. But something stopped him. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the part of him that was still student Chen, still the promising one who had something to contribute to the world. If he erased it, this solution would be lost. Professor Hartwell would keep struggling with her equation. She might never find this particular approach. And this solution was good. Marcus knew it was good. It could help her research. It could be important, but if he left it, people would ask questions. They would want to know who had written it. They would look at the security cameras. They would figure out it was him. And then what? What would happen to the janitor who solved equations he had no business solving? Marcus's hands were shaking now. He put the chalk back in the tray. He picked up his cleaning cloth, the one he had set down when he first started writing. The cloth was still damp, still ready to wipe the board clean and erase all evidence of what he had done. He raised the cloth toward the board. His arm felt heavy. His chest felt tight, but he could not do it. He could not erase this work. It was the first real thing he had done in 20 years that felt like it mattered. That felt like it was truly him. Marcus lowered his arm. He put the cleaning cloth in his pocket. He looked at the equation one more time, at the solution he had written, at the proof that he was still a mathematician somewhere deep inside. Then he turned around and walked quickly toward the door. His footsteps echoed in the empty lecture hall. His heart was pounding. He grabbed his cleaning cart and pushed it into the hallway. The wheel squeaked louder than ever. Marcus did not look back. He just kept walking, pushing his cart toward the stairs. He needed to finish his work. He needed to get out of this building before anyone came, before anyone saw what he had done. But as he walked, he could not stop thinking about the board. About his handwriting mixed with Professor Hartwell's handwriting. About the solution waiting there for someone to find it. About the moment when they would see it and wonder who had been there. The whole hall would freeze, Marcus thought. When they see it, the whole hall will freeze. He pushed his cart up to the 3rd floor and tried to focus on his cleaning, but his hands were still shaking. And somewhere deep in his chest, underneath the panic and worry, there was still a small spark of that happiness, that feeling of being himself again, even if only for 15 minutes. Marcus finished his cleaning in a daze. He emptied the trash on the 3rd floor. He wiped down surfaces. He checked the bathrooms. He did everything he was supposed to do, but his mind was somewhere else. His mind was still in Lecture Hall B, standing in front of those chalkboards holding that piece of chalk, being Student Chen one more time. By 8 o'clock, Marcus had finished all his work. He took his cleaning cart back to the janitor's closet. He put away his supplies and locked the closet door. Then he clocked out and left the building through the side entrance, the same way he had come in. The campus was waking up now. Students were walking to their early classes. Professors were arriving with their briefcases and coffee cups. The day was starting for everyone else. But for Marcus, something had ended and something had begun. He was not sure which was bigger, the ending or the beginning. He just knew that nothing would be quite the same after this morning. After those 15 minutes when he had stopped being invisible and had let himself be seen, even if only by an empty room and a chalkboard full of symbols that most people would never understand. Professor Diana Hartwell was having a bad morning even before she got to her office. She had spilled coffee on her shirt while driving. The traffic had been terrible, and she had this equation that was making her feel stupid, which was not a feeling she enjoyed. Diana was 43 years old and had been teaching at Riverside University for 12 years. She had published over 30 papers in respected journals. She had won awards. Other professors asked her for advice on their research. Students respected her. She knew she was good at what she did, but this equation was beating her. She had been working on it for 3 weeks now. Every approach she tried led to a dead end. The math just would not cooperate, and she needed to solve it soon because she had a paper deadline coming up, a paper that could be really important for her career. The equation was part of her research on turbulent fluid flow. Turbulence was one of the big unsolved problems in physics. Nobody really understood why fluids became turbulent under certain conditions. Diana's research was trying to create better mathematical models to describe it. If she could solve this equation, it would be a real breakthrough. But the equation was stubborn. It had boundary conditions that seemed to fight against each other. Every method she tried just made things more complicated instead of simpler. Diana pulled into the university parking lot at 7:40. She was early, which was normal for her. She liked to get to her office before the chaos of the day started. Before students began knocking on her door with questions. Before committee meetings and emails and all the other things that filled up her time. She grabbed her leather bag from the passenger seat. Inside it was her laptop, a notebook full of failed attempts at solving the equation, and a folder of papers she needed to grade. She also grabbed her coffee cup, even though it was now half empty after the spill. Diana walked across campus toward the mathematics building. It was a beautiful morning. The sun was just getting high enough to light up the tops of the buildings. Birds were singing in the trees. A few joggers ran past on the campus paths, but Diana barely noticed any of it. Her mind was already on that equation. She was thinking about maybe trying a numerical approach instead of trying to solve it analytically. Sometimes you had to admit that exact solutions were impossible and settle for good approximations. But that felt like giving up. Diana did not like giving up. She reached the mathematics building and went inside. The hallways were quiet. She could smell cleaning solution and floor wax. The janitor must have just finished, she thought. That man Marcus, who was always so polite. She saw him almost every morning when she came in early. He would nod and say good morning and move his cart out of her way. Diana climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor. Her office was down the hall, but she decided to stop by Lecture Hall B first. That was where she had been working last night. She had stayed until almost midnight, covering the chalkboards with different attempts at the solution. Maybe if she looked at it with fresh eyes this morning, something would click. She walked down the hallway and pushed open the door to Lecture Hall B. Her coffee cup was halfway to her mouth when she froze. The chalkboards looked different. Diana took a step forward, squinting. Her first thought was that someone had erased her work. But no, her equation was still there, all of it. But there was more now. Much more. Someone had added to it. Someone had solved it. Diana's coffee cup tilted in her hand. She did not notice that coffee was dripping onto her shoe. She just stood there, staring at the chalkboards with her mouth slightly open. She walked closer, her eyes moving rapidly across the symbols and numbers. The new handwriting was different from hers. Rounder numbers, slightly different style, but the math was incredible. Whoever had done this had introduced a substitution that Diana had never considered. It was elegant and simple, and it cut right through the complications that had been stopping her. Then they had used a coordinate transformation that made the boundary conditions work together instead of fighting each other. Diana set down her coffee cup on the desk. She pulled her reading glasses out of her bag and put them on. She needed to see this more clearly. She moved right up to the board and started following the logic step by step. It was correct. Every step was correct. More than correct. It was beautiful. This person had solved her equation in a way that was not just functional, but genuinely creative. This was not just someone who knew math. This was someone who understood it deeply. But who? Who had done this? Diana pulled out her phone and checked the time. 7:48. The building had been locked all night. Only people with keys could get in, and only a handful of people had keys to this building. The professors in the math department, the janitors, security. That was it. She took a photo of the chalkboards with her phone. Then another photo. Then several more from different angles. She wanted to make sure she captured everything before anything happened to it. Then she called Raymond Torres. He was the chair of the mathematics department. He was probably still at home having breakfast, but this could not wait. Raymond answered on the fourth ring. His voice sounded groggy. "Hello, Diana? Is everything okay? Ray, you need to come to the university right now. Come to Lecture Hall B. What? Why? Is there an emergency? Someone solved my equation. The one I have been working on for weeks. Someone came into the lecture hall and solved it overnight." There was a pause. "What are you talking about? Just come. You need to see this. And bring whoever else is around. I do not know what this is, but it is important." Diana hung up and called two other professors who she knew came in early. Professor Martinez and Professor Kim. She told them both the same thing. "Get here now. You need to see this." While she waited, Diana studied the solution more carefully. She took out her notebook and started writing down the steps, checking each one against her own knowledge. The substitution technique was not one she had seen before. It seemed to draw on some older research that was not commonly taught anymore. The coordinate transformation was brilliant. It turned a nearly impossible problem into something manageable. Whoever did this was not just good at math. They were exceptional. Professor Kim arrived first. She was a small woman in her 50s who specialized in analysis. She came rushing into the lecture hall looking worried. "Diana, what is going on? You sounded so strange on the phone." Diana just pointed at the chalkboards. Professor Kim walked up to them. Her eyes got wide. "Oh my God, did you do this? When did you figure it out?" "I did not do it." "Look at the handwriting. Someone else was here. Someone solved it." Professor Kim looked closer. She pushed her glasses up on her nose and leaned in. "This substitution, where did this come from? I have never seen this approach before." "I know. I have been trying to figure that out too." Professor Martinez arrived next, followed closely by Raymond Torres. Both of them had the same reaction. Confusion, then amazement, then a flood of questions that Diana could not answer. "Who did this?" "I have no idea." "When did it happen?" "Sometime between midnight and this morning." "But who has access to this building at night?" "Security has keys." "The janitors have keys." "We have keys." That is it. More professors started arriving. Word was spreading somehow. By 8:15, there were 7 faculty members crowded in front of the chalkboards, all talking at once. Everyone had theories. Everyone had questions. Dr. Torres tried to bring order to the chaos. Okay, everyone calm down. Let us think about this logically. Diana, you were the last person in this room last night? Yes, I left around midnight. The equation was unsolved when I left. And the building was locked? It should have been. The doors lock automatically at 11. So whoever did this either had a key or was already in the building when it locked. Professor Martinez spoke up. Could it have been a graduate student? Maybe someone working late in one of the study rooms? Diana shook her head. No graduate student could do this. This is advanced research level work. This person used techniques that I did not even know about. Professor Kim was still studying the board closely. This substitution method, I think it might be from a Chinese paper I read years ago. Very obscure. Published in a small journal. Not many people would know about it. Everyone looked at her. A Chinese paper? Raymond asked. Yes. I read it when I was doing postdoctoral work. It was about... Oh, what was it called? Something about transformation techniques for partial differential equations. The author was... She frowned, trying to remember. I cannot recall the name, but it was elegant work, not widely known in the West. Raymond pulled out his phone. I'm going to call security. We need to check the camera footage from last night, see who came in here. He stepped out into the hallway to make the call. The other professors kept discussing the solution. Was it correct? Could they verify every step? What were the implications for Diana's research? Diana stood back and let them talk. She was looking at the chalkboards, but also thinking about something else, something that was bothering her. The person who did this had been careful, methodical. Every step was written out clearly. This was not someone scribbling quick notes. This was someone who wanted to be understood, who wanted their solution to be complete and correct. But why had they not signed it? Why had they not left a name or a note? Why had they just disappeared? Raymond came back into the room. Security is pulling the footage now. They will call me back in a few minutes. The clock on the wall said 8:35. In 25 minutes, students would start arriving for the 9 o'clock class that was scheduled in this room. Diana needed to make a decision. Should she erase the boards? Save the solution somehow? Cancel the class? We should not erase this, Professor Kim said, as if reading Diana's mind. This is too important. We need to document it properly. I already took photos, Diana said. But you are right. We should be systematic about this. Professor Martinez had an idea. What if we tape paper over it? Protect it until we figure out what happened. The students will ask questions, Raymond said. This will be all over campus by noon. Let them ask questions, Diana said. I want to know who did this. I want to find them. Raymond's phone rang. He answered it and listened. His face changed from curious to surprised to something else. Something Diana could not quite read. He hung up and looked at everyone. The room got quiet. Security checked the footage, Raymond said slowly. Only 3 people entered this building after midnight. Diana, when you left. A security guard who did a building check at 2 a.m. and Marcus Chen, the janitor who arrived at 6:30 this morning to clean. Everyone was silent for a moment. The janitor, Professor Martinez said. That makes no sense. The camera shows him entering lecture hall B at about 7:05. He was in here for... Raymond checked his notes. For 17 minutes. Diana felt something strange in her chest, like a puzzle piece sliding into place. Marcus. The janitor who said good morning to her every day. The quiet man with the cleaning cart. That is impossible, Professor Kim said. A janitor could not have done this. This requires years of advanced training. But Diana was remembering something. The way Marcus looked at the chalkboard sometimes. Not just glancing at them before erasing them. Really looking at them. She had noticed it before but never thought much about it. I need to find him, Diana said. I need to talk to him. He is probably still in the building, Raymond said. He usually works until 8:30 or 9. Diana was already moving toward the door. She walked quickly down the hallway, looking for any sign of a cleaning cart. The other professors followed her, confused and curious. They found him on the 3rd floor. Marcus was putting away his supplies in the janitor's closet. He had his back to them so he did not see them approaching. Marcus? Diana called out. He turned around. When he saw the group of professors standing there, his face changed. Just for a second, Diana saw something flash across his expression. Was it fear, guilt, recognition? Then his face became neutral again, the polite, invisible face of someone who knew how to not cause trouble. Yes, Professor Hartwell, he said. Is something wrong? Diana took a breath. The whole group was watching, waiting. Marcus, were you in Lecture Hall B this morning? A pause, a very long pause. Yes, he said finally. His voice was quiet. Did you write on the chalkboards? Another pause. Marcus looked at the floor, at the walls, at anything except the professor staring at him. Then he looked up and met Diana's eyes. Yes, he said. I solved your equation. I am sorry. I should not have done that. It was not my place. The hallway was completely silent. 7 professors stood frozen, staring at a janitor who had just admitted to doing something impossible. Diana felt like the world had tilted sideways. Nothing made sense anymore. But somehow, looking into Marcus's eyes, she knew he was telling the truth. How? She asked. It was the only question that mattered. How did you do that? Marcus's hands gripped the handle of his cleaning cart. His knuckles were white. It is a long story, he said quietly. Then you better start telling it, Raymond said. His voice was not angry, just completely bewildered. Marcus looked at all of them. These successful professors with their PhDs and their published papers and their important research. And then he looked at his cleaning cart, at his worn work gloves, at the floor he had just mopped. I used to be a mathematician, Marcus said. The words came out slowly like they hurt to say. A long time ago, in another life. And then, standing in that hallway with his cart and his mop, Marcus Chen began to tell them his story. The professors brought Marcus to an empty conference room. They wanted to hear his story properly. Not standing in a hallway, not rushed. They needed to understand what had just happened. Marcus sat down at the long conference table. His cleaning cart was outside in the hallway. His work shift was technically over, but he did not think about leaving. He had carried this secret for 7 years. Maybe it was time to let it out. Professor Hartwell sat across from him. The other professors found chairs around the table. Everyone was quiet, waiting. Marcus could feel their eyes on him. These were important people, smart people, and here he was, just a janitor about to tell them he used to be one of them. I was a graduate student at Tsinghua University, Marcus began. His voice was quiet but steady. In Beijing. This was more than 20 years ago. I was studying differential equations. He told them everything. About his research. About his professors who said he was gifted. About the papers he was going to publish. About the future that seemed so bright and certain. Then he told them about his father getting sick. About the choice he had to make. About giving up everything to take care of his family. As he talked, Marcus watched the professors' faces. Professor Hartwell looked sad. Professor Kim had tears in her eyes. Raymond Torres was leaning forward, listening carefully to every word. Professor Martinez was shaking his head slowly, like he could not believe what he was hearing. After my father died, I came to America, Marcus continued. My cousin said he could help me find work. I got a job here, as a janitor. I told myself it was temporary, just until I figured things out. But temporary became permanent. I got married, had children. Life happened. But you never forgot the mathematics, Professor Hartwell said softly. Marcus shook his head. No, I never forgot. Every morning when I cleaned this building, when I saw the equations on the chalkboards, it was like hearing a language I used to speak, a language I still understood but was not allowed to use anymore. Why not? Professor Kim asked. Why did you not try to come back to it? You could have taken classes. Finished your degree? Marcus smiled sadly. I was too old, too tired, too far behind. The field moved on without me. I had responsibilities, a family to support, and honestly I was afraid that maybe I was not as good as I remembered. Maybe I had lost it. But you did not lose it, Professor Hartwell said, gesturing toward where the lecture hall was. That solution you wrote this morning, that was brilliant work. Marcus looked down at his hands. They were rough and calloused from years of cleaning work. Not the hands of a mathematician. I should not have touched your equation. I know that. But when I saw it this morning, something in me just woke up. I could see the solution so clearly, and I thought just this once. Just let me do this one time. You used a substitution technique that I have never seen, Professor Hartwell said. Where did you learn that? From a paper published in a Chinese journal. About 23 years ago. It was written by one of my professors, Professor Zhang. He was studying transformation methods for complex systems. Not many people read that paper. It was published in Mandarin in a small journal, but I read it many times when I was a student. Professor Kim snapped her fingers. That is the paper I was trying to remember. I read it during my postdoc. It was incredible work. Professor Zhang was brilliant, Marcus said. His face brightened a little when he talked about his old teacher. He could see patterns that nobody else could see. He taught me to look at problems from different angles, to not just apply standard methods but to think creatively. They talked for almost 2 hours. The professors asked Marcus questions about his education, his research, his understanding of current mathematics. Marcus answered them all. As he talked, something strange happened. He started to feel more comfortable, more like himself, like he was not just a janitor telling a story, but a mathematician having a conversation with colleagues. Professor Torres asked about specific theorems. Marcus knew them. Professor Martinez asked about recent developments in the field. Marcus admitted he was not current on the latest research, but he understood the foundational concepts that everything was built on. Professor Hartwell asked if he had solved any other equations over the years. Marcus hesitated, then admitted that sometimes when he saw problems on the chalkboards he would work them out in his head while he cleaned. He never wrote anything down, just solved them silently and moved on. How many? She asked. Marcus shrugged. I do not know. Maybe hundreds. I never counted. The professors looked at each other. There was something amazing and sad about this. A brilliant mind, solving problems in silence, never sharing what he knew. Invisible. Finally, Raymond Torres leaned back in his chair. Marcus, I do not fully understand your situation yet, but I know talent when I see it. And what you did this morning was not just talent, it was expertise, deep expertise. What I did was inappropriate, Marcus said. I understand if you want to fire me. I should not have touched Professor Hartwell's work. Fire you? Professor Hartwell looked shocked. Marcus, you solved a problem that has been stopping me for weeks. You opened up a completely new approach to my research. Why would I want to fire you? Because I am just a janitor. I have no right to be doing mathematics. That is ridiculous, Professor Kim said firmly. Mathematics does not care what your job title is. If you can do the work, you can do the work. Raymond Torres was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he said, Marcus, what if I told you that you could do more mathematics? Not just this one equation, but regularly, as part of a job. Marcus looked up sharply. What do you mean? I mean, I want to offer you a position. We would need to work out the details, but I am thinking something like a research affiliate. You would have access to the library, to our resources. You could audit classes if you wanted to update your knowledge, and you could work with our faculty on research problems. Marcus stared at him. I do not have a degree. I never finished. We can work on that too, Raymond said. There are programs for non-traditional students. People who have experience but need to complete formal requirements. It would take time, but you could finish your doctorate if you wanted. I am 52 years old, Marcus said quietly. So, I know professors who got their PhDs in their 60s. Age is just a number. Marcus felt something overwhelming rising in his chest. Hope mixed with fear, mixed with disbelief. This could not be real. Things like this did not happen to people like him. I would need to think about it, he said. This is a lot to process. Of course, Raymond said. Take all the time you need. But Marcus, please think seriously about it. You have a gift. It seems like a waste to keep it hidden. Professor Hartwell spoke up. And Marcus, I want to ask you something else. The solution you found to my equation, would you be willing to help me write it up? As a paper? I would like to publish it, but I want your name on it too. You did the work. Marcus's hand started shaking. His name on a published paper. Something he had dreamed about 25 years ago. Something he thought was lost forever. Are you serious? He asked, completely serious. This is your discovery. You deserve credit for it. Marcus put his face in his hands. He was not crying, but he was close to it. Everything felt too big, too overwhelming. After so many years of being invisible, of being nobody important, suddenly people were seeing him. Really seeing him? I do not know what to say, he whispered. Say yes, Professor Kim said gently. Say yes to all of it. You deserve this. They talked for a while longer, working out basic details. Marcus would keep his current job for now, but the university would create a special position for him. He would start by sitting in on some graduate seminars. relearning things he had forgotten, learning new developments he had missed. Professor Hartwell would meet with him regularly to work on the paper. She would help him get back into academic writing, which had its own language and rules. When the meeting finally ended, it was almost noon. Marcus stood up from the conference table. His legs felt shaky. The other professors shook his hand one by one, congratulated him, welcomed him. Professor Hartwell walked him out to the hallway where his cleaning cart still waited. They stood there together in the empty corridor. "Marcus," she said, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. How did you do it? How did you keep going all these years, knowing what you could do but not being able to do it?" Marcus looked down the hallway, past the offices and classrooms, past all the spaces he had cleaned thousands of times. "I told myself it did not matter, that my life had gone a different direction and that was okay, that I had helped my family and raised my children and those things were valuable too, and they were valuable. They are, but there was always something missing, like a color that was not in my life anymore. I did not let myself think about it too much because thinking about it hurt. So I just kept moving forward. One day at a time." Professor Hartwell nodded. "I am glad you wrote on my chalkboard. I am glad you could not stop yourself this time." Marcus smiled. It was a real smile that reached his eyes. "Me too. Even though I was terrified when you found me. What were you afraid of? That you would think I was crazy, or that I was overstepping, or that I would lose my job, or that," he paused, "or that I would try to come back to mathematics and discover that I really could not do it anymore. That the one thing I still had from my old life was just a memory and not real. But it is real," Professor Hartwell said firmly. "What you did this morning proved that. Your mind is still sharp. Your understanding is still deep. You have not lost anything except time, and we can work on getting that back." They said goodbye and Marcus pushed his cleaning cart down the hallway for the last time that day. But it felt different now. Everything felt different. He was still a janitor. Still had the same responsibilities. Still had the same rough hands and tired knees. But something had shifted inside him. A door had opened. A door he thought was locked forever. As he left the building and walked across campus toward the bus stop, Marcus thought about his old professor, Professor Zhang, back in Beijing. He wondered if his professor was still alive, still teaching. He wondered what Professor Zhang would think if he knew that his student, the promising one who disappeared 20 years ago, had just used his substitution technique to solve an important equation. Maybe he would write to him. Tell him what happened. Say thank you for teaching him to see patterns, for teaching him that mathematics was not just about memorizing methods but about creative thinking. The bus arrived. Marcus got on and found a seat by the window. As the bus pulled away from the university, he looked back at the mathematics building. Its red brick walls, its tall windows, its halls that he had walked through countless times as an invisible person. But he was not invisible anymore. Professor Hartwell had seen him. The other professors had seen him. They had seen not just a janitor but a mathematician, someone with knowledge and skill and something valuable to contribute. For the first time in 20 years, Marcus let himself think about what might be possible. About finishing his degree, about publishing papers, about teaching, about being student Chen again, or maybe someone new, someone who was both the janitor and the mathematician, both the person who had given up his dreams and the person who was getting a second chance at them. He did not know what would happen next. Life had taught him that plans could fall apart, that futures could disappear overnight, that you could not count on anything staying the way you expected. But right now, on this bus looking out at the city passing by, Marcus let himself hope, just a little bit. Just enough. The whole hall had frozen when they saw his work. And in that frozen moment, something had changed forever, not just for Professor Hartwell and her research, but for Marcus too. He had been frozen himself for 20 years. Stuck in place, unable to move forward or back. Maybe now he could finally move again. Professor Hartwell did not waste time. Over the weekend, she made phone calls. Lots of phone calls. She called the dean. She called the graduate school. She called a foundation she knew that helped non-traditional students. She called colleagues at other universities who might have advice. Everyone she talked to had the same reaction. First disbelief, then curiosity, then excitement. A janitor who could solve advanced mathematics problems? A lost mathematician found after 20 years? It was the kind of story that people wanted to be part of. By Monday morning, things were moving fast. The dean approved a special research affiliate position for Marcus. It came with a small stipend. Not much, but enough that Marcus could cut back on his janitorial hours and have time to study. The foundation that Professor Hartwell contacted offered something even bigger. They had a program for people who had left academic careers due to family responsibilities or financial hardship, people who deserved a second chance. They offered Marcus a full scholarship to complete his doctorate. Marcus could barely process it all. On Monday afternoon, he sat in Professor Hartwell's office while she explained everything. The position, the scholarship, the opportunities. His hands were shaking as he held the papers she gave him. "This feels like a dream," he said quietly. "Like I am going to wake up and still be just a janitor." "You were never just a janitor," Professor Hartwell said firmly. "That was just what you did for work. It was never who you were." Over the next few days, word spread through the mathematics department, then through the whole university. Then somehow a local news reporter heard about it. They wanted to do a story. Marcus was terrified, but Professor Hartwell convinced him to say yes. "People need to hear stories like yours," she said. "Stories about second chances, about hidden talents, about people who do not give up even when life is hard." The news story aired on Thursday. It was only 3 minutes long, but it showed Marcus in the mathematics building. It showed the lecture hall where he had solved the equation. It showed him talking about his journey from China to America, from student to janitor to mathematician again. The response was overwhelming. The university started getting emails and phone calls. Other janitors and cleaning staff from around the country reached out. People who had hidden skills and dreams they had given up. People who wanted to know if it was too late for them, too. Students on campus started recognizing Marcus. They would stop him in the hallways to ask questions or just to say hello. Some of them were first-generation college students themselves. Some came from immigrant families. They saw themselves in Marcus's story. But the biggest thing was still coming. Professor Hartwell scheduled it for the following Monday, 9 o'clock in the morning. Lecture Hall B. She sent emails to the whole mathematics department, to the graduate students, to interested faculty from other departments. She even let the news station know. Marcus was going to teach his first lecture. He barely slept the night before. He kept thinking about all the ways it could go wrong. What if he froze up? What if he forgot everything? What if people came just to see the janitor fail? But Professor Hartwell had worked with him all week preparing. They had gone through the solution step by step. She had helped him organize his thoughts, shown him how to explain complex ideas simply, given him confidence that he could do this. On Monday morning, Marcus arrived at the university early. He was wearing his janitor uniform. Professor Hartwell had suggested he wear something more formal, but Marcus refused. "This is who I am," he said. "I am not ashamed of it." When he walked into Lecture Hall B at 8:45, he stopped in the doorway. The hall was packed. Every seat was filled. Students sat in the aisles. Faculty members stood along the walls. There were people Marcus had never seen before. The news camera was set up in the back. Marcus's heart started pounding. This was too many people, too much attention. He wanted to turn around and run, but then he saw Professor Hartwell. She was standing at the front of the hall smiling at him. She waved him forward. Marcus walked down the aisle. His legs felt shaky. Everyone was watching him. The whole hall was silent, waiting. He reached the front and stood next to Professor Hartwell. She put her hand on his shoulder for a moment, a gesture of support. Then she turned to address the crowd. "Thank you all for coming," she said. Her voice was clear and confident. "I am going to let Marcus introduce himself. But first I want to say something. What you are about to see is not just a lecture about mathematics. It is a reminder that talent and knowledge can exist anywhere, in anyone, sometimes in places we do not expect. And when we find that talent, we have a responsibility to nurture it, to celebrate it, to give it space to grow." She stepped aside. Marcus was alone now at the front of the hall. He looked out at all those faces, young students, older professors, people with cameras and notebooks. He thought about running again, but then he saw something that made him stop. In the front row there was a young woman. She looked nervous. She had a backpack covered in patches from different countries. She was watching Marcus with wide eyes that reminded him of himself 25 years ago, eyes full of hope and hunger for knowledge. Marcus took a deep breath. Then he began to speak. "My name is Marcus Chen," he said. His voice was quiet at first, but it grew stronger. "I am a janitor at this university. I have been cleaning this building for 7 years. But before that, I was a graduate student in mathematics. And before I was a janitor and before I was a graduate student, I was just a kid from a small village in China who loved numbers." The hall was completely silent. Everyone was listening. "I am going to tell you how I solved Professor Hartwell's equation," Marcus continued. "But I am also going to tell you something more important. I am going to tell you that knowledge does not go away just because you stop using it, that the things you learn and love stay inside you waiting, sometimes for a very long time." He turned to the chalkboards. They still had his solution from the week before. Professor Hartwell had protected it, covered it with clear plastic sheets so it would not be erased. Marcus picked up a piece of chalk. It felt natural in his hand now, not strange like it had felt that Tuesday morning. He had crossed a bridge since then, a bridge from his past to his future. For the next 50 minutes, Marcus taught. He explained the problem first. What makes this particular equation so difficult? Why Professor Hartwell had been stuck. He used simple language, breaking down complex ideas into pieces that everyone could understand. Then he walked through his solution. The substitution technique he had learned from Professor Zhang. The coordinate transformation that made everything click into place. He did not just show the steps. He explained the thinking behind them. The intuition, the creative leaps. As he taught, something amazing happened. Marcus stopped being nervous. He forgot about the cameras and the crowd. He just focused on the mathematics and the joy of sharing it. The students took notes frantically. The professors nodded along following his logic. Even the news reporter seemed engaged, though she probably did not understand half of what Marcus was saying. Marcus drew diagrams to illustrate the flow of fluids. He showed how the mathematics described something real and physical. He made connections to other problems and other techniques. He was not just teaching one solution to one equation. He was teaching a way of thinking. Toward the end of his lecture, Marcus turned back to face the hall. "When I was young, I thought mathematics was about being smart, about knowing the right formulas and methods. But I have learned something different now. Mathematics is about seeing patterns, about asking why, about not giving up when something is hard." He paused. The young woman in the front row was leaning forward, hanging on every word. "I gave up my mathematics career 20 years ago," Marcus said. "I had to. My family needed me, and I do not regret that choice. I did what I needed to do. But I also lost something important. I lost the part of myself that loved this work. That was good at this work." His voice got softer, more personal. "Last week when I wrote on Professor Hartwell's chalkboard, I was terrified. I thought I would get in trouble, lose my job, but I also felt alive in a way I had not felt in 20 years, because I was doing something that mattered, something I was meant to do." The hall was frozen again. Not a sound, not a movement, just attention. "So someone asked me last week if it is ever too late," Marcus said, looking directly at the young woman in the front row. "To go back, to try again, to become what you were meant to be." He set down his chalk, wiped his hands on his janitor's uniform. "I do not know if it is ever too late," he said honestly. "I only know that it is not too late right now, today, this moment. Whatever you have inside you, whatever knowledge or talent or dream, it does not have an expiration date. It waits, sometimes for a very long time, but it waits." Marcus smiled. "And when you finally let it out, when you finally let yourself be who you really are, that is when the magic happens." The hall exploded in applause. Students stood up. Professors clapped. The sound was deafening. Marcus stood there overwhelmed as the applause went on and on. The young woman in the front row was crying. She raised her hand and Marcus pointed to her. "Yes?" Her voice shook when she spoke. "I am from the Philippines. I work 2 jobs to pay for school. Sometimes I am so tired I think about quitting. But your story, it gives me hope. Thank you." Marcus felt his own eyes getting wet. "What is your name?" "Maria." "Keep going, Maria. Whatever you are studying, whatever you are working toward, keep going. You are stronger than you think." More hands went up. More questions. Marcus answered them all. About his research. About his life. About how he had kept learning even when he could not use what he learned. About advice for students who were struggling. When the lecture finally ended, people crowded around Marcus. Students wanted to shake his hand. Professors wanted to discuss his technique. The reporter wanted more interviews. Professor Hartwell rescued him after a while, guiding him to her office where it was quieter. She closed the door and smiled at him. "You were incredible," she said. "Natural. Like you have been teaching for years." Marcus sat down heavily. The adrenaline was wearing off. "That was the most terrifying thing I have ever done." "But you did it. And you changed people's minds today. About what is possible. About who can be a mathematician." Over the next few weeks, Marcus's life transformed completely. He still worked as a janitor, but only part-time now. The rest of his time was spent in classes and research and meetings with faculty members who wanted to collaborate with him. He started working on his paper with Professor Hartwell. They called it an alternative approach to turbulent flow equations using classical transformation methods. Both their names were on it. They submitted it to a top journal in computational physics. Marcus also enrolled in graduate courses. He had to relearn some things. 20 years was a long time, but the foundation was still there. Strong and solid, he was rusty but not broken. The best part was the students. Young people would come to his office hours, not just to ask about mathematics, but to talk about life, about balancing school and work, about immigrant experiences, about second chances and late starts. Marcus became a mentor without meaning to. He became someone who represented possibility. If he could do it, maybe they could too. 3 months after that first lecture, the paper was accepted for publication. Professor Hartwell called Marcus into her office to tell him. "We did it," she said, grinning. "Your first published paper in over 20 years." Marcus held the acceptance letter in his hands. His name in print, Marcus Chen, co-author, mathematician. He thought about Professor Zhang, about Lin, about his father and his sisters and Sarah, about all the people who had been part of his journey. Some were gone now, some were far away, but they had all helped him get here even if they never knew it. 6 months later, something else happened. Marcus was invited to give a talk at an international mathematics conference. Not about his research this time, but about his story. The organizers wanted him to speak about education and opportunity and hidden talent. Marcus was nervous again, but he said yes. Professor Hartwell went with him to the conference. It was in San Francisco, his first time flying anywhere in years. When he walked onto the stage in front of hundreds of mathematicians from around the world, Marcus felt that same moment of panic. Who was he to be here? He was just a janitor, just someone who had gotten lucky. But then he remembered the young woman, Maria, in the front row of his first lecture. He remembered her tears and her question, "Is it too late?" And he remembered his own answer. Marcus began to speak. He told his story from the beginning. The promise, the loss, the long years of silence. The morning he could not stop himself from writing on a chalkboard. The professors who saw him. The second chance he never expected. Mathematics is not just for young geniuses, Marcus said near the end of his talk. It is not just for people with fancy degrees and perfect careers. Mathematics is for anyone who loves it, anyone who is willing to work for it, anyone who sees beauty in patterns and truth in equations. He looked out at the audience. So many faces, young and old, from every country, every background. Some of you might be like me, Marcus said. You might have stepped away from mathematics for reasons beyond your control, or maybe you never got the chance to pursue it in the first place. Maybe you are cleaning buildings or driving buses or doing work that has nothing to do with your real passions. His voice grew stronger. I am here to tell you that it is not over. Your knowledge is not wasted. Your talent is not lost. You are not too late. The applause that followed was different from the applause at his first lecture. This was not just appreciation. It was recognition. It was people seeing themselves in his story and believing, maybe for the first time, that their own stories could change too. After the talk, people lined up to meet Marcus, to shake his hand, to tell him their own stories of interrupted careers and hidden dreams, to ask advice, to say thank you. An older man with gray hair waited until the end. When everyone else was gone, he approached Marcus. He spoke in Mandarin. Student Chen, he said. It has been a long time. Marcus froze. He knew that voice. It was older now, but unmistakable. Professor Zhang? Marcus's voice cracked. Is it really you? His old professor smiled. The same smile Marcus remembered from 25 years ago. I read about you in the news. About the janitor who solved the equation. When I saw the name Marcus Chen and heard about Tsinghua University, I knew it had to be you. I had to come see for myself, they hugged. Two mathematicians separated by time and distance but connected by the language of numbers they both loved. I am sorry I disappeared, Marcus said. I wanted to contact you, but I was ashamed. I had failed. Professor Zhang shook his head. You did not fail. You took care of your family. That is not failure. That is honor. They talked for an hour. About the past. About Professor Zhang's continued research. About the paper Marcus had just published using his old teacher's technique. About everything that had happened in between. Before they parted, Professor Zhang said something that Marcus would remember forever. When I taught you all those years ago, I knew you were special. You had a gift, but gifts are not enough. What makes a mathematician is not just talent. It is persistence. It is love for the work. It is the willingness to keep thinking even when you have no paper to write on, no board to write with, no audience to share with. You have proven you have all of that. You are a mathematician, student Chen. You always were. Marcus went back to Riverside University changed again. If that frozen moment in the lecture hall had been his rebirth, this conference was his confirmation. He belonged here, in this world of ideas and equations, not despite his past, but because of it. The next semester, Marcus taught his first official class, Introduction to Differential Equations. Some of his students were traditional college students, but some were older. Some worked full-time jobs. Some had families. Some had taken long breaks from education. They looked at Marcus and saw someone who understood, who had been where they were, who knew how hard it was to balance learning with living. On the first day of class, Marcus stood at the front of the same lecture hall where he had solved Professor Hartwell's equation a year earlier. The boards were clean now, ready for new problems. Welcome, he said to his students. I am Professor Chen, or Marcus. Whatever you prefer. Before we start, I want to tell you something about this room. He gestured around the hall. A year ago, I was standing in this room with a mop and a cleaning cart. I was invisible. I was nobody important. But I made a choice to do something I was not supposed to do. I wrote on this chalkboard, and that choice changed everything. The students were quiet, listening. Each of you has made a choice too. Marcus continued. To be here. To learn, to grow. Some of those choices were easy. Some were hard. Some came with sacrifices. But you are here. That matters. He picked up a piece of chalk. Mathematics is beautiful. It is also difficult. There will be days when you do not understand, when you want to give up, when you think you are not smart enough or not fast enough or not good enough. Marcus smiled. On those days, I want you to remember that there was once a janitor who thought the same things, who believed his chance had passed, who thought mathematics was not for people like him anymore. And then one morning he picked up a piece of chalk, and the whole hall froze, and everything changed. He turned to the board and started writing. The first equation of the semester. The beginning of a new journey for his students. The continuation of his own journey. Let us begin, Marcus said. And in that frozen moment before the lesson started, before the chalk scratched against the board and the students opened their notebooks and the work began, there was possibility, pure and perfect possibility. The kind that waits inside all of us no matter how long it has been buried, no matter how far we think we have strayed, no matter how late we think it is, the kind that never expires. It just waits for the right moment. The right equation. The right morning when we cannot stop ourselves from picking up the chalk and showing the world who we really are. And when that moment comes, when we finally let ourselves be seen, that is when the magic happens. That is when the whole hall freezes and everything changes.